Welcome to the President's third annual Town Hall, which is part of UBC's report to the community. The Town Hall focuses on UBC's internal community, faculty, staff, and students. An online annual report to the external community will be available on November 28th. This year, the format's changed slightly from last year. After brief remarks from the President, he and I will have a conversation right over here. It'll be an opportunity for me to ask some questions, to convey some questions that have come in, and also for you to ask some questions. Perhaps a historic moment where a sitting president of a major university willingly sits down with a 60 Minutes producer. CITR Campus Radio is broadcasting live and will have a podcast available after the event. But first, your student board member, Sean Heisler, brings welcoming remarks. Sean.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the Board of Governors, not only to welcome you to the Town Hall this afternoon, but also to a new academic year that promises to be both challenging and stimulating for us students here at UBC. Education, or rather an excellent post-education like UBC, hasn't been created by any one stakeholder. It involved a major investment from the government, continued interest from the private sector, and a substantial contribution from us students. We gave UBC the purpose. And then faculty and staff also give a lot of their time and energy to UBC, and they're the ones who are propelling us to excellence. So with that, we'd like to say thank you to all of you for really making UBC a place of mind, and a fantastic place of mind. I'm happy to add that the Board of Governors has enjoyed an excellent year working with Professor Toop and his administration to help meet many of the challenges which face us today. Our deliberations have one clear goal: to serve the university to the best of our ability. Although members bring to the board various views from their constituencies, be it faculty, student, staff, or external, there are no clear advocates for any one interest group. Decisions are made consulting the situations and the data that we have access to, with the end goal of enhancing the long-term health of this place of mind. We also welcome occasions like this town hall as check-in points for us. They provide us with the opportunity to see what the current issues of the stakeholders are. And we also look to see if our decisions are having the impacts we were hoping for. So with that, on behalf of the UBC board, I want to thank you all for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing what is top of mind for all of you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Sean. And now, President Toop.
Well, thank you very much, Peter. Thank you, Sean, and thank you to all of you for taking the time to be with me and with Peter today. It's really a tremendous honor to be here, and I do want to acknowledge the presence of our Chancellor, Sarah Morgan-Sylvester, as well as the Chair of our Board of Governors, Mr. Bill Levine. You've already met one of our student board members, Sean Heisler. Welcome, Sean. Great to have you here. In addition, I'm proud to say that all of the members of the UBC executive team are here. I'm not going to introduce them one by one because I don't want to take up time. I want to be able to get to questions. But I will take a moment to say that I am tremendously proud and honored to be able to work with the people that I work with here at UBC. I think it would be fair to say that there is no stronger team of vice presidents and deans, and I think heads of units of the university anywhere in the country. I think we are being very well served by the distributed leadership of the university, and I do want to take this moment to say thank you to my staff, to say thank you to the vice presidents and all of those people who work so hard on behalf of UBC. Thank you very much. I also want to signal the presence of many alums amongst us. Of course, at UBC, quite a few people who graduate from the university choose to come and work here, and I think that that's a testament to the success of the institution. It really is very encouraging that so many of you are here and that there is more and more opportunity for engagement amongst our alumni community. I want to remind you that everything that I do is rooted in the vision statement of Place and Promise, the UBC plan. I'm not going to repeat the vision statement, but I think it does set out quite succinctly what we're trying to achieve. The revised vision statement and Place and Promise was, of course, launched in 2009 at the end of the year in December. So we're into implementation mode. The strategic plan is, of course, a living document, and I do encourage you to take a look at the website where you will find further information about implementation of the plan. In particular, a report that we have to do each year to the UBC government, where there is a lot of detail about how we are implementing Place and Promise. Obviously, in a day like today, I can't get into all of that detail, so those of you who are interested in very particular areas, please look at that report. I want to remind you that within the plan, there are 3 core commitments, primarily to student learning, to research excellence, and to community engagement, but that those are supported by 6 other essential commitments within the plan. I'm not going to be able to talk about all of those today. I'm going to focus on the 3 main pillars or core commitments, and then I'll say a couple of words about both Aboriginal engagement and sustainability. And I won't be able to cover other areas. But I do think that having a plan that we can then relate to, connect with, and implement helps to focus our energies, helps to focus our resources, and perhaps more importantly than anything else, helps us to say no to certain things. And that's one of the hardest things to see happen at a university. We like to believe that we're everything to everybody and that we can do everything. But of course, that's hard for any group, any institution, no matter how large. I am proud to say that the budget of the university is now fully linked to the plan, and here I have to signal the incredibly hard work, not only of our finance team, but of the deans and finance directors across the university. They've worked very hard to make that happen. The second annual report on the plan is found at www.strategicplan.ubc.ca. Now I want to highlight some key elements in the implementation of the plan from the last year. Of course, we're all well aware that technology is playing an increasing role in university operations. What is perhaps less well known is that we're really trying slowly and sometimes fitfully, but I hope with some purpose, to move away from simply relying on traditional website and person contact. For example, student recruitment at UBC is now being conducted through Facebook, through Twitter, and with a UBC mobile app, which has actually received a very major international award for its application. We also, of course, see more and more within classrooms, such as COM 101 and others, the integration of blogs, live classroom tweets in teaching, etc. Now, I have to say that students have taken the leadership role here and shown us where we need to go. If you think about perhaps the most dramatic public statements or engagements of the university in the last year, I would say that both of them related to student initiatives. One was the mob vote, the Get Out the Vote video that was done and very successfully went public, and then, of course, even more, the lip dub, which is quite a remarkable achievement on behalf of a cast of hundreds of students. The VP Academic and Provost continues to establish a slate of student learning initiatives, meeting our commitment to provide at least 2 enriched educational experiences for every undergraduate. And this is a top priority for all of the UBC leadership last year and this year. We're also beginning work on a plan to support the wider summer use of campus. It's being worked on quite aggressively through the Provost and VP Finance Resources and Operations Office. And that relates to some very, very specific areas of engagement over the summer, but also a rethink of the model of summer school, especially in the faculties of arts and sciences. I'm delighted to remind you that there has been a very strong commitment made to student housing, a commitment by the Board of Governors to put in place 2,500 new beds by 2016, and in the land use plan, a commitment to make best efforts to get to 50% of our students full-time students living on campus. There's another major initiative which I'm very excited about, and I'm not sure all of you will have heard about it yet, and that is a plan through enrollment services that over the coming 2 years we want to implement a process where every student who comes into UBC is assigned a service advisor at the time of his or her admission, and that advisor would follow the student through his or her program at UBC. I think it's a powerful statement about opening up communication channels and making sure that there is effective assistance being provided to students in what is admittedly a very big university that can sometimes feel isolating. On research excellence, the second of the pillars of Place and Promise are overall commitments. I am thrilled to remind you that last year, UBC received more than $549 million in research funding for 8,050 projects. That is the direct result of our outstanding professors and researchers who go out and get peer-reviewed grants to support their research. It's an increase of $25 million from the previous year, and it's the largest amount of money that UBC has ever been able to devote to research. Of course, it's also meant that we can attract outstanding people like Matt Farrer, UBC's first Canada Excellence Research Chairholder, but it also attracts partnerships with interesting consortia of companies like Wavefront Wireless, which has become a national resource hub on wireless communications. We've also attracted Tim Durrance and his research group, who developed a radiant energy vacuum food dehydration technology. Many doctoral students here were awarded Vanier scholarships, providing up to $50,000 a year for 3 years in support of their graduate studies. We've also launched a new support mechanism for professors and researchers across the university called SPARK, the Support Programs to Advance Research Capacity. The idea here is to ensure that all of our professors have access to support mechanisms to do the very best job they can in trying to attract research funding support. Our UILO has made tremendous changes over the course of the past few years, and this year in particular. It's really stepped away from a traditional focus on intellectual property contracts, and instead it's trying to establish multiple channels to support innovation and partnership through industry engagement, knowledge mobilization, and entrepreneurship. On community engagement, I want to emphasize that the community engagement strategic plan, part of Place and Promise, is now in consultation phase, and I encourage all of you who have an interest in the relationship between UBC and our wider communities, the partnerships that exist, to engage in that consultation. Community service learning initiatives are across the university and growing. Sauder School operational research students developed a chemo smartbook scheduling system for the BC Cancer Agency, decreasing waitlisted patients by 84%. That is a remarkable achievement. Land and food system students worked with the YWCA to create safe food systems that will produce up to 1,000 kilograms of fresh fruit and produce for the downtown east side. Students in the Faculty of Law investigate alleged wrongful convictions through the Innocence Project. Dental students provide comprehensive oral health care into the downtown east side through the Portland Community Clinic. Researchers work with communities as well to change community practices that need changing. Professors Marc Ansemino and Guy Dumont have developed a computer-based system to assist anesthesiologists in the operating room. Don Mavinik developed a technology that transforms wastewater nutrients into valuable fertilizer. I could go on, but there are many, many examples of direct engagement between the university and our wider communities. I mentioned that I was only going to highlight a couple of other initiatives, and I want to focus on Aboriginal engagement for just a moment. Here, a new program, which is extremely interesting, has UBC working in partnership with Langara College to provide a very clearly articulated and well-supported transition path for Aboriginal students from college to university. This is, I think, a model that I hope we'll be able to replicate in other circumstances. It's one of the best ways for us to ensure that Aboriginal students have the best possible chance of success in university. In addition, on the Vancouver campus, UBC has launched the Aboriginal Portal, which provides information for prospective and current students and other topics ranging from our community interactions to Aboriginal-focused courses and programs, community-based research opportunities. I do want to mention a couple of things on the sustainability front because it's been really quite a dramatic year. Many colleagues across the university in all sorts of departments have been working hard to create a system where we can begin to imagine a minor in sustainability that would be available to every student at UBC. This is an enormous undertaking, but we're really making progress, and I'm excited about it. I also have to crow a little bit. I try not to do that too much at these meetings, but UBC was the first Canadian university to receive a gold rating, which is the highest achieved to date, in the STARS system, which is called the Sustainability Tracking, Assessment, and Rating System. That's a sustainability evaluation tool developed by the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education, based in the United States. So far, there have been 117 universities that have received ratings, and ours is, of course, amongst the highest. That results from pioneering clean energy projects, aggressive carbon reduction programs and strategies, and of course the creation of North America's greenest building in the SURS project. I also want to emphasize that we've been working hard to promote operational sustainability to ensure that going forward we're using our resources as effectively as we possibly can to advance the vision in place and promise. And so we have developed a distributed integrated model, that's the terminology, a distributed integrated model that I think helps us work effectively across the many units of the university. We've already implemented that model of engagement in development, in IT, in finance, in HR, and we're actually looking over the next year to apply it in the area of communications as well. And the notion here is that you can't centralize everything, but we have to do a little better job coordinating all of the wonderful people working across the university to pursue our ends effectively. The final point I want to make is to emphasize that UBC will be announcing in the next couple of weeks the largest comprehensive campaign for a university in Canadian history. That's an alumni engagement campaign where we want to ensure greater and greater connection with our alums, but it's also a fundraising campaign. And so I encourage all of you to come to the official campus launch on the 28th of September at 10 a.m. in the War Memorial Gym. I think it will be a fun and exciting moment in the history of the university. I do want to conclude by emphasizing that in 2011-12, the budget of the university was balanced. There are, of course, no deficits and no accumulated debt, and there are no cuts to faculty or to other units across the campus. I want to take a moment to say that that is a remarkable achievement that you have all been part of. It's remarkable because if you look at the world around us, you'll know that many sister institutions are facing dramatic cuts, in part because of cuts to government support, but also because of problems with pension funds and problems with accumulated debt. We have none of those situations here at UBC. So we made a report to the Board of Governors not long ago, and the wording that we used was healthy not wealthy. And that's the right message. Healthy, not wealthy. The university has done well, but there are, of course, always clouds on the horizon with the current financial picture, both of the province and of the world more generally. And I am optimistic about our immediate future, but I am concerned that in the medium term, there may be some stressful times ahead. I hope not, but we're doing everything we possibly can to make sure that UBC is operating as efficiently and as effectively as we can, so that if we do have to face financial challenges in the future, we're well positioned to do so. I'll stop there because I know that Peter wants to ask some questions, some of which have been submitted online, some of which are going to be his questions, I think, and then we'll, of course, have opportunity for you in the room to ask questions as well. Thank you very much, everyone.
Well, great, thank you. I was going to ask, the first question I was going to ask was the financial health of the university, but you answered that. So I guess sort of a follow-up to that is some concerns that have been expressed about sort of the increased corporatization of campus to help supplement some of the current and potentially future financial pitfalls. Nextera has a bioenergy pilot project, Pulse Energy, BC Hydro, Modern Green, a Chinese real estate development company, is helping to pay for the CIRS building. Are you concerned about the increased corporatization of campus?
Short answer is no, I'm not, and let me explain why. I actually think that the model that we're pursuing now is quite different from what people may have felt was a model of corporatization of some universities a decade ago or even 15, 20 years ago. I think the first generation of attempting to develop relationships with corporations was one in which universities thought that they were going to come up with big, huge, comprehensive agreements, and they were going to be exclusive agreements. I remember when I arrived at UBC, there was a lot of chatter about an exclusive soft drink beverage agreement. Frankly, in my view, those kinds of agreements are just not particularly helpful to anybody, and they actually get in the way of some of the things that universities should be doing, which is open inquiry and really challenging ourselves to get the best value for money in all of our relationships. What we're doing now is a totally different set of approaches. So I'll take the Nextera example. This is a little local BC company that developed a very exciting technology for biomass gasification. They came to us and said, you know, you're trying to meet your own sustainability targets. You've made the most aggressive greenhouse gas reduction promises of any university of which we're aware. How are you going to deliver? Maybe we can help you deliver, and maybe you can help us through your researchers to improve what we're doing with this biomass gasification technology. So we looked at that and said, that looks like a real winner for us because it helps a local company. In this case, it also connected them with a global company, GE, which produces engines for the facility that we're building. It was something that our own researchers in applied science wanted to work on through the clean energy group. And it also is one of the ways that we're going to meet our sustainability targets, our greenhouse gas reduction targets. That looks like a winner to me. It's not about commercialization of the campus. It's about finding ways to partner with organizations that actually can really help us achieve our goals as well. Similarly, I think there's a partnership with another small local BC group, actually a UBC spinoff called Pulse Energy. And they're helping us by using about 70 of our buildings in a test phase so that we can figure out how building systems can be monitored more effectively to reduce our energy consumption. Again, we're meeting our own GHG reduction targets. We're actually allowing our own researchers to have access to the campus as a living laboratory, and we're helping a local company test out some of its technologies. That's the kind of partnership that I think is really exciting, actually, for universities. And by the way, it's not just about corporations, and then I'll stop, Peter. One of the most exciting partnerships that we have, and I became very aware of it last year when I co-chaired the United Way campaign for the Lower Mainland, is a partnership between the United Way and the Human Early Learning Partnership, HELP, at UBC. We do phenomenal research about school readiness, whether or not children actually are ready for school. And the short answer is that in BC, roughly 30% of our children are not ready for school. And that research is now informing very concrete programs that are all across our community, sponsored by the United Way. So I think these partnerships are the way of the future for universities because they're how we get what we study here and what we're committed to much more aggressively out into the wider community.
Well, staying on the theme of finances, a question that's come in from a number of people, both within faculty and at the student level, is cost of living. Vancouver is arguably one of the most expensive places to live in North America. There's been concern expressed in some of the questions from faculty members, senior faculty members, that they have difficulty recruiting high-level professors because of the cost, and there's even concern that it's hard to attract students because it's expensive to live in this city. What is the university doing to address those issues?
So I think it's actually the biggest challenge that UBC faces going forward in terms of recruitment and retention, both of students and faculty. There are other issues, you know, we always want to do a better job with childcare. There are issues sometimes about dual appointments and things like that. But if I had to single out one issue, I would say it is this. It's really housing more than cost of living more generally. And it's of course an issue for students, and it's an issue for faculty and staff. And in fact, we've done some research that shows that the group that's under the greatest pressure here is our staff. It's not our faculty, but I'll come back to that. If I look at the student situation, of course, one of the things we're trying to do is build out more and more on-campus housing. I mentioned that the Board of Governors has been just fantastic in pushing this agenda. Many of you will know that one of the decisions taken last year by the board was to create a student housing endowment fund so that we could borrow money effectively and wouldn't have to wait for the province to authorize debt for the university to move forward. So we're doing that. On the other hand, we know that the provision for student financial aid for housing is utterly inadequate. It pretends that housing costs a certain amount when in fact it costs more than that. So we're looking at a very substantial rethink on our financial aid programs, our bursary programs. We're advocating strongly in collaboration with student government around the whole area of student loans. In fact, I just had a meeting with the minister last week, and this was one of the top agenda items. Obviously, the government's under pressure. I don't know how much they're going to do in the short term, but we're going to keep pushing. When it comes to faculty, there's obviously a serious issue there. There is already a very modest mortgage assistance scheme in place. And over the last, I guess it's probably about a decade, we've built about 644 below market rental properties on the campus. And we've built, as many people will know, almost 200, I think it's 198 co-development projects where faculty members or staff could invest with the university and actually live on campus. And again, about 20% below market. It's not enough. And we know it's not enough. So happily, the Board of Governors made a decision about 6 months ago to create a housing task force. It's chaired by Professor Nassif Gussoub of the Department of Mathematics, and he's also a governor. And they're working very assiduously to gather information from across North America to figure out what projects and programs exist in other circumstances and to see whether some of them might work here. We're exploring all options, increasing rental on campus at below market rates. We're looking at how you actually help faculty and staff acquire equity without creating intergenerational inequalities. I mean, one of the weird things that happens if you use university resources and you help some people, is that you might find that they get a huge benefit from that, but others are completely left out of the program. So we're looking at that very carefully. I can tell you that this group, I think, visited 6, if I remember, 5 or 6 different universities where we'd already done some background work to figure out what they were doing. And a lot of people are struggling with this, especially in high real estate value areas. And of course, Vancouver is the epitome of that. So that group is going to be reporting back within the next few months, and the board is going to have to think about the kind of proposals that it wants to ratify to try and address the situation. I can only say it's top of mind, and it is, by all accounts, across the university recognized as a fundamental issue.
As you say, most students still do not live on campus. Students, faculty, staff live off campus. This is largely a commuter campus. I know that they're a very long way to the bus loop. There has been there's been discussion with TransLink about setting up some sort of light rail. That discussion, I believe, has failed, correct?
No.
Or it's ongoing?
We're not there.
Okay. Well, I guess the
I'll come back
question
to
is,
that.
what is being done to sort of ease the burden and the challenges on commuting to this campus?
So, one thing that UBC has already done is to make the decision that we're going to try and have more people living on campus. I already talked about the build out for student accommodation. We'd like to get to 50% of full-time students. We have fairly aggressive targets in the Okanagan as well. Not every student wants to live on campus, but what we do know is that we have to provide a real variety of housing opportunities for students, and we have to hit price points that people can afford. So that's one piece. The other piece is, of course, all of the development that takes place on the South Campus and elsewhere. We have a rule that 50% of everyone who lives on the campus, even in the so-called market housing, should be affiliated in some way with the university. And we've met that target. So that's already changing the dynamic. I live on this campus. And when I arrived here, I know how utterly dead the campus is outside of the main teaching times for the university. I think that has to change, and I think it is changing. I mean, it used to be that if we ran out of milk in my house on a Friday, we'd have to drive or take a bus for 8 kilometers and back in order to get a liter of milk. You don't have to do that anymore. So, I think the building out of a sustainable community on campus is fundamental on this question. But the transit issue is also crucial. Pierre Houillet, Vice President Finance, Resources and Operations, and I met with the leadership of TransLink at the beginning of the summer to reaffirm how utterly crucial it is for UBC that we develop some form of mass transit to the campus. We're also working with mayors across the various municipalities. One of the problems we have at UBC is we are not represented on TransLink. I mean, you need to understand that. There's no one at TransLink that represents UBC, even though we're the second largest transit destination in the Lower Mainland after the downtown core. So there's a structural governance problem there that I have been raising and I'm going to continue to raise. So where we are now is that TransLink has been engaged in a whole series of consultations. 7 options have been presented to a wider public. They've had lots of commentary, including from UBC. We are pushing really, really hard for a commitment that if any line is built across town, so to speak, that it come all the way to UBC and it not stop at Arbutus, which is one of the options. And we've also been pushing for real rapid transit, not just a supposedly enhanced bus route, which we don't think will solve any of the problems at all. No decision has been taken, Peter, so that's the good news. Bad news is that apparently TransLink's going to come out with a series of options with no recommendations, and then we will be into another phase of consultation where, as I mentioned earlier, UBC does not really have an official voice. So we're looking at that and trying to figure out how we can best influence TransLink and indeed how we can influence the province. We are trying to work collaboratively with student government around this because we know this is an issue that's important, hugely important for students, but also for staff and faculty.
Another thing that's come out in the questions, and as a faculty member I can tell you comes out in conversations among faculty members, is the change in copyright rules. Faculty members, I hit a nerve. I mean, we're all sort of redoing basically everything we do to address the changes. Without maybe getting too detailed into what those changes are, because that could take half hour here.
No, it would take about 3 hours.
Yeah. What is your office doing to try to address these? Is there any effort to maybe even work with the Canadian government to update the laws which are clearly outdated?
So that's the bottom line, right? So we're starting from a regime that was created for another world. And we're all suffering because of that. And you probably know that there have been various attempts to reform copyright legislation in Canada for decades. We have been utterly unsuccessful. It will be interesting to see whether the government with a majority chooses to make this a priority. There is some suggestion that they might. So we're all being placed in a really uncomfortable situation. And the one point I want to make is, for me, I don't want to be positioned ideologically on a spectrum of open and closed access. I don't actually think we have to. Lots of people have incredibly strong views around those questions. How much should be available free on the internet versus protection for people who imagine themselves to be creators in some way or another, and indeed sometimes are creators. So there's a real tension there, and we haven't hit the balance in Canada through any regime that we can live with. So what happened recently, and what has caused real consternation in, I have to say, universities across the country, is that the group that has many of the licenses pulled together and which purports to represent many publishers is called Access Copyright. And that group made a proposal, which it was going to bring to the Copyright Review Board, which was going to enormously increase the cost of copyrighted material. We at universities got quite concerned about this, because the reality is, when that happens, it's a direct hit on our students, because there's no provision in our budget to just suck up those costs. Some of our sister institutions have made the decision that all they're going to do is pass the costs on to their students and make them live with it. We know that students are already paying very, very high rates for textbooks, access to materials, etc. We don't want to simply pass on more charges. The second point to remember is that it's a bit of a guesstimate, but we know that at least 50%, and it could be as high as 70% of the material that we are paying for when we pay Access Copyright, we're already paying for by having online licenses. So we're effectively being asked to pay twice for the same material. And Access Copyright has been absolutely unwilling to try to parse that out and figure out what we need to pay for and what we don't. They just bundle everything and say you pay for the whole thing. There's no way you can carve out subcategories. So we looked at that situation, and a whole series of universities across Canada, not just UBC, decided we can't put up with this anymore. We were frankly being held hostage, and I will use that term intentionally, and we decided that we had to push back. I know that it's very hard. We do know that, and we're trying to do everything we can do to find support mechanisms. We're working with the library system, the Office of the Provost. We are creating a team that we hope is going to be able to go out and find out what licenses actually contain. We want to try and provide faculty members with resources, but we know that this year in particular, because of the timing of all of this, it's putting a lot of pressure on people. I'm very sorry about that, but I honestly believe it's the right thing to do. And so I'd ask you to just try to be patient and to work with us. If you see areas where you need help and you're not getting it, let me know, let the provost office know, let the librarian know. We're all working really hard to try to make this work, but we do know that it's a very, very difficult moment of transition.
Well, let me change topics a little bit, and then maybe we have time for one or two more questions, and then we'll open up. Another thing that's come out in several of the questions is around vivisection, use of animals in medical research. There's been a concern for many years. In interest of full disclosure, I've actually advocated for the reduction of animal use in medicine for many years, and have done a lot of research on that. I guess one of the concerns is that there's a feeling amongst some of the people who've submitted questions that the university has not been forthcoming about how much money is spent on animal research, what kinds of work is being done, what kinds of provisions are being made to protect animals. So how do you answer that question? Do you feel like that university has communicated well enough, and what can you share about the use of animals in medical research?
So I think that the university has not communicated well enough. And in fact, I've talked with a lot of my colleagues about this issue now for some months, and we're trying to figure out how to do a better job of really providing some information. This is a really tough set of questions, and I know there are people in the audience who feel very strongly about it, and that's perfectly valid set of concerns, and I know, Peter, that you've worked on this area yourself. So from my perspective, there's a whole, as in so many things, there's a kind of balancing act that has to go on. There are some things that I can really reassure people about. One is that UBC is not positioned really any differently than any other major research-intensive university in North America and probably in Europe on these questions. We know from the Canadian Council on Animal Care, which looks at facilities and approaches, protocols, ethical guidelines across the country, we meet all of those guidelines, and they're serious. I know some people think maybe they aren't serious. All I can say is we at UBC have had to spend over $100 million in the last 5 years to upgrade our animal care facilities because the CCA has been really tough-minded in saying you have to do a good job in the way you're protecting animals that are used for research. So we have done that. We also, of course, have to submit every single experiment to an ethics panel that includes people who are from outside the university, who have to look at these experiments and pass them under the ethical guidelines that are created by the Canadian Council and other ethics organizations. Tri-Council, the Medical Research Council in Canada, CIHR, the other councils look at this with great intensity. Actually, one of my closest friends has been in charge of that ethics review over the last couple of years. So people are looking at this very seriously. Now, for some people, the answer is just don't do the research on animals. Now, and that's where the balancing comes out. I have been convinced, and talking with lots of people about this issue, that there are some kinds of experiments that are really important for human health, trying to figure out how to prevent Huntington's disease, how to address the scourge of Alzheimer's, which is ravaging elderly populations across the world, how to address questions of the increasing problems with diabetes and heart disease. These are things that affect you, that affect your children, your grandchildren, your parents, your grandparents. There are researchers who are passionate about trying to do something about that, and they tell me they can't model what they want to do without access to animal research. So we have to balance that. Have we told the story as well as we could about that? I don't think so. Have we released as much information about that as we should? I don't think so. I mean, for example, we should be able to say how many animals are being used on campus. I can tell you across the country, it's about 3 million. It's about 3 million animals at research facilities across the country. I can tell you that I've already asked some questions, and I'm told, and this is preliminary, that if you had sort of the largest categories by far at UBC, it would be fish of various sorts and mice, not surprisingly. We are currently not doing any research on cats or dogs, I can tell you that. And I hope that over the next while we'll be able to be a little bit more forthcoming. Now, the balance on that, and I want to be really open with you, is that our researchers feel a little bit nervous about this. Because in other places, and I'm not suggesting it would happen here, but in other places, people have been targeted. people who are actually trying to do good things, in their view. So if you release information that allows people to know specifically who's working on various elements, that can be quite frightening, let's be honest, for some of our researchers. So finding the balance between trying to allow for more information and actually considering the interests of our own faculty members is, I think, a responsibility of the university, and we'll try and do that as best as we can. But I can also say we're looking hard to try to figure out how we can be a little more forthcoming with some basic information around the research.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you one last question, and then we'll open up. The strategic plan, you've talked a lot about it. I think most people in here have studied it and know it fairly well. And one of the issues is increasing Aboriginal students. I know my department has made great efforts in that. Many departments have, and I've seen the statistics. But there's another set of statistics that are troubling. Provincial statistics show that 5% of Aboriginal students graduate from high school. You can have this utopian ideal, but the reality on the ground that's perhaps a little bit beyond the reach of your office and the university makes that difficult. Is there efforts to address high school graduation rates and to increase outreach and make university life a real clear part of the narrative of the lives of Aboriginal high schoolers?
Yeah. So I really struggle with this because one of the risks, of course, at a great university like UBC is that you can start, and I referred to it in my remarks, you can start thinking that you can do everything, right? That you can solve the world's problems. And, there are a couple of our sister institutions that in their own campaigns and whatnot have made grand declarations that they're going to solve problem A, problem B, or problem C, and that you should give them a lot of money because they're going to do that. Well, I like to be a bit more, in my view, authentic than that. We're only part of a big system. And we have things that we can do, but we can only do certain kinds of things effectively. We're not a social service organization. We don't have control over public policy. We don't have control over how money is spent by the federal or provincial governments. So we can't solve all the world's problems. Do we have a contribution to make? And working together, can we do better? Absolutely. So there are some very specific initiatives that we are undertaking. Working lower down. One fantastic thing that's done, and it happened out of a group of math professors through the Pacific Institute of Mathematical Studies, PIMS, which is actually a group of people who think about high-level mathematics, but they got very frustrated when they looked at the data and saw that there were no Aboriginal kids coming into mathematics. Then we started looking at what was happening even in our neighborhood, and people went to the Britannia School and discovered that something like over the last 15 or 20 years, there hadn't been a single Aboriginal kid, and the school's, I think, half Aboriginal, half Musqueam, essentially. Not a single Aboriginal kid had graduated with grade 12 math, not one. So PIM said, what can we do? They've gone in with a program to help actually communicate this, and it's now extended to other communities in the country. And last year, I think there were 2 grade 12 math grads, Aboriginal. I think it was 2, may have been 4, but a small number, but it's an incremental step. That's a very concrete thing. Another thing that we're doing is trying to work through a program called Chinook, which comes from the Sauder School of Business, working with community colleges, so reaching down a little further, not to high school, but community colleges all through the north near Aboriginal communities to help Aboriginal kids imagine that they could have a career in business. Because they're just not exposed to it. And so this Chinook program is working in a distributed model with all of those community colleges, providing curriculum and providing mentorship and networking opportunities for those kids. There are things happening, but none of us yet has really found, I think, the scale to really make a fundamental difference. Last point I'll make is, do we have a role to play? Of course we do. We're producing most of the people who are actually teachers in those programs. Our NITEP program, which is somewhat, in my view, anachronistically called the Native Indian Teacher Education Program, that program is the largest creator of Aboriginal PhDs in the country. And those are people who are going back and working in their communities at the high school and elementary school levels. It's tremendous, but so far none of it has had the real impact that we need. So we're always looking for opportunities of partnership to make a difference.
At the risk of plugging my own school, School of Journalism has a new Aboriginal reporting course, so
yes,
trying to do our share.
Which is fantastic, and the medical school has done brilliant work over years. The law school has done exceptional work. So actually, at sort of higher level professional programs, oddly, have been more successful than the broader based programs. And that's because you can target people who are just so outstanding that they're going to succeed, as opposed to trying to help people who may be just strong, solid students, but aren't your real high flyers. And figuring out how to help them is the real challenge.
Well, let's open it up to the forum here.
So I think that there are mics on either side.
You could line up and I'll just...
Hello? So why has, I mean, you obviously want UBC to be more open and transparent about its animal research, but why has UBC refused to disclose any information upon request based on the Freedom of Information Act so far? Like, not even one page of any information regarding animal research.
So I think that the short answer is exactly what I talked about before. There's a balancing that we have to achieve between trying to be open with general information and providing information that actually could identify very specific people within the university who do work. And we are trying to figure out how to hit that balance, and frankly, I don't know that we've hit it right yet.
Thank you.
I also wanted to thank you for talking about the vivisection issue, and I have another animal rights related question. I'd like to know why UBC relies so heavily on animal research when such research is misleading, cruel, unnecessary, and sometimes even hazardous to human health. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has reported that of all drugs found safe and effective in animal tests, 92% have been found either unsafe or ineffective on humans. Can you comment on that?
No, because I don't know anything about it. But I don't accept your premise, I'll be honest. I mean, you assert that it's unhelpful, unsafe, etc., but many people who work in the university who are very leading scientists tell me something differently. And, you know, I've got to listen to people who actually do this work as well. Can I also ask that I do want to make sure that people who may have other sorts of questions have an opportunity. And I will guarantee that if there are more questions around animals, there will be people here at the end of the session who can also answer those questions, because I do want to make sure that other questions have an opportunity. Thanks.
Hi there. My question concerns the UBC Equity Office. Currently, there are a number of harassment and discrimination cases before the BC Human Rights Tribunal in which the university is named as a respondent. And all of the complainants in these cases have gone through the UBC Equity Office's internal investigation processes and have opted to spend the time and money to take their concerns to the tribunal because they believe that the UBC process is neither adequate nor fair to complainants. So given the number of faculty and students who have opted to take their cases to the BC Human Rights Tribunal, or in some cases leave the university entirely, do you believe that the Equity Office is able to do its job in a way that is fair to complainants? And what steps are being taken to ensure that this pattern doesn't continue?
Well, first off, I'm not sure whether it's fair to describe it as a pattern, because I think you do have to analyze what actually happens to those cases before you can declare it a pattern. And I may be wrong, but to my knowledge, I don't think that there have been many cases in which at the end of those processes, UBC has actually been found to be in breach. So, I mean, the fact that people might be unhappy doesn't necessarily mean that there has been, even objectively pursued by a tribunal, an equity violation. But the bigger question I think you're asking is whether or not the office is as effective as it might be in addressing equity concerns. And I guess what I would say is I think the office makes very solid efforts to do that. I think it's very strong in trying to manage cases. I would say, however, that I'm not sure that we have invested enough attention, broadly speaking, in equity issues, and we're beginning to change that dynamic at the university. And so, for example, there's going to be an appointment announced very soon for a special advisor in relation to female faculty members, a special advisor to the provost, to address concerns more proactively. We've been working with the Faculty Association on pay equity questions, which are important. You probably know that a guy named Alden Habakon has been working on behalf of all of us to try to tease out how we can work on the intercultural dialogue question, the commitments in place and promise, and that has direct impact on equity considerations, very direct impact, because sometimes the equity concerns that people raised have to do more with perceptions around climate and how they've been treated than in any other area. Finally, I will mention that we actually have approved and the board's ratified a climate statement about how to improve and make sure that we're always working in the most effective ways we can with one another within the university, and we want to try and see whether we can resource that more effectively as well to address these concerns.
Thank you.
Hi there. There's been some pretty vocal opposition to the Gage South project of late, I'm sure you've heard. I wanted to know if you could provide some clarity on the issue, Professor. Would there indeed not be concerts on campus if the condo project went through?
Okay, so I want to be really clear. The board has already said that whatever happens with Gage, it's not about condo projects for the market, right? So that is not on the table. The question that has arisen in Gage, as I understand it, is really whether or not any housing should be included in that neighborhood. And the question then is, if there's any housing, should it only be student housing, or might there be faculty and staff housing? There was, at the request of the Board of Governors, a committee that's been created, a working group, to address that question. What I can tell you is no decision has been taken. It is still open. They are discussing, as I understand it, various options, and I'm told that the committee will come back, or the working group will present 3 options for public consultation. So I want to be really clear, because I think there's been some assertion that there will be no opportunity for consultation. That's not true. What they're doing is working on a set of options. They will then go out to the community, and we purposely timed this. The board was quite cognizant of this, wanted to time the consultation so that it occurred after students came back, but before we got into exam periods, et cetera, et cetera. So that's going to be happening over the course of the next number of weeks. I don't know the exact timing on that, but it'll happen relatively soon. And there will be a free-for-all of anyone who wants to participate to come in and provide their views. My sense is that that working group is working diligently. There are a lot of moving pieces. For those of you who follow it, and I know some people follow it very closely, there's the moving piece of the TransLink and where the bus terminal would be. There's McInnes Field. There is the Aquatic Center. I guess one piece of frustration I have is that there's actually a lot of good news in this. The good news is it looks like we might get a new aquatic center. It looks like we're finally going to sort out the bloody transit hub, which people have been working on for about a decade. And there's a commitment, I can tell you this, to ensure that there's open, bookable space for students. So there's a lot of good news in this, and the piece that's not certain is how do we deal with the housing front. And the reason we're concerned about the housing piece goes back to Peter's question. There are a lot of people out there who are looking for more affordable housing. We're trying to figure out where it's best placed on campus and how we can deliver it. So if I can reassure you on one point, it is there's no cooked up deal here. I'm very frank. Nothing has been decided. Options are on the table, and they will go out for public consultation.
Okay.
Well, it's actually 1 o'clock, so I know there's several more questions. I'm sorry we didn't have time for them.
Can I say then that if you have a question and you haven't been able to get to me, if you just go online and submit the question, I promise that you'll get an answer. And for anyone who submitted a question which Peter didn't get to, we will provide you with a detailed answer in response to any email that you sent in. So you won't be left out, I promise.
You stole my line. Yeah, presidents.office strategicplan@ubc.ca is where you can send your questions. We invite you to go to strategicplan.ubc.ca/reporting to view the whole Place and Promise report. And the event has been videotaped and will be available on the President's website in the next week. Thank you, all of you, for coming out, and have a good afternoon.
Thanks.